Okay, so now for this example, I have two functions here. So it says for f of x is equal to 3x plus 2 and g of x is equal to 6x minus 5, evaluate the following. So here, kind of like what I was talking about in that first video, we actually have two different functions. So this is where this kind of lettering also comes in handy, because now I can say, okay, function f and function g. So I'm going to use those to evaluate the following. So the first one says I want to find f of 2. So that means I am going to my function f, and everywhere I see an x, I'm instead replacing it with 2. So instead of 3x, I'm going to write 3 times 2. And again, don't forget your parentheses there. Well, 3 times 2 is 6. And then 6 plus 2 is 8. So I get f of 2 is equal to 8. And so again, if I was writing that as a point, that would be the point 2, 8. Because the 2 is my x, my input, my output is my y. Okay, let's try the next one. So now I have a g of negative 3. So now I'm going to my g function, and everywhere I see an x, I'm instead writing negative 3. So instead of 6x, I'm going to have 6 times negative 3 minus 5. Well, 6 times negative 3, I get negative 18 minus 5, which gives me negative 23. So again, that's the same thing as the point negative 3, negative 23. Okay, go ahead and pause the video, and I want you to try number 3 on your own. Okay, so plugging in negative 1 for x, you should have gotten negative 1 as your answer, so this would be the point negative 1, negative 1. Okay, now number 4 looks a little bit different. I see that I have this 3 out in front. So now that means basically I'm going to find g of 5, but I'm going to multiply it by 3 at the very end. So I'm going to start off with just finding g of 5. But I'll show you another way to do it after. So finding g of 5, that means I'm plugging in 5 for x. So instead of 6x, I have 6 times 5 minus 5. Well, 6 times 5, I get 30. Just 25. And then now, in my last step, I need to multiply that by 3. And so 3 times 25, I get 75. Now I'm going to show you a different way to do it. So another way you can do that is you can leave that 3 out in front and then put parentheses around your g of 5. And so that, remember, that was 6 times 5 minus 5. Which is 25, which is 75. So you can do it either way. This one looks a little bit more complicated. It's not too bad. So it may be easier for you to do it the other way, but either way is okay. Just whatever works best for your head. Okay, so now for this one, I am working with both the functions. So it's saying to find f of negative 1 plus g of negative 4. So I'm going to go ahead and first start with finding f of negative 1. Well, f of negative 1, that is just 3 times negative 1 plus 2. And then g of negative 4. Well, 3 times negative 1, I get negative 3, which is negative 1. 6 times negative 4 is negative 24, and so I get negative 29. So I found my f of negative 1, it's negative 1. G of negative 4, I get negative 29. Now I need to add those two together. So -1 plus -29, I get -30. Okay, go ahead and pause the video and try and do that next one on your own, following the same steps that I did. Okay, so the answer you should have gotten was 5. After I found a g of 3, I got 13. When I found f of 2, I got 8. And then my very last step, I need to subtract those two. So 13 minus 8, and you get 5. Okay, now let's look at the other way around. So now this question says, for h of x equals 2/3 x minus 5, find the value of x for which h of x is equal to -7. So now I don't know what I'm inputting, so it's just going to stay x. But I know my output is going to be -7. That's what my answer is going to be at the end. In these problems above, we were trying to find that answer by plugging in our known x. But now we want to go the other way. And so whenever that happens, I already know what h of x is equal to, so I'm just going to replace this h of x up here with -7. So now instead of having h of x equals 2/3 x minus 5, I'm going to have -7 is equal 2/3 x minus 5. And that's because we already know that h of x is equal to -7. So I can just replace those two. And now I'm just going to go back to chapter 1 stuff and we're going to solve for x. So I'm going to start off with adding 5 on both sides. And so I get -2 is equal. And then remember, when we have a problem like this, to get rid of that fraction, I'm going to first start off by multiplying both sides by the denominator. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 3. So those cancel out. And then divide both sides by 2. And so I get that x is equal to -3. Okay, go ahead and pause the video and try and do number 8 on your own. Okay, so for this one, again, I was wanting to find the value of x for which f of x equals 12. And so since I already know what f of x is equal to, I replace that with 12. So I have 12 equals -x plus 18. And then I want to get x by itself, so I move the 18 over. And then here is where some of you may have tripped up. I'm left with this -x out here. And so I need to get rid of that negative. And so one thing that's kind of important to remember is that -x, that's really the same thing as -1 times x. Just like -6 is really the same thing as -1 times 6. You can pull out that -1. So whenever you see a -x, you can really think of that as -1x. And then what do you do when you have a number multiplied in front of x and you want to get rid of it? Well, you just divide both sides by it. And so to get rid of that -1, I need to divide both sides by -1. So whenever you have a -x, to get rid of it, you're going to divide both sides by -1. And so you get x is equal to 6. Okay, now we're going to look at this graph again to find each of the following. And so, just like when we did in that other video, f of 0, this 0 is my x. So I'm going to go and look at my graph to see what y is equal to when x is 0. So here's 0, and I go down to my graph, that's this point right here, and I see y is equal to -1 there. And so I have the point 0, -1. And then f of 5, I see that's my x, and so I'm going to go to the right 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I go up to the graph, and I see y is equal to 1 right there. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and skip to D. And so this one says find x if f of x is equal to 2. And so remember, my f of x is really saying that my y is equal to 2. So I want to go to 2 on my y-axis, which is right here, and go all the way to my graph. So it's going to be this point right here, and I'm going to see what x is equal to at that point. Well, I see that that is at 7. So this is really the point, 7, 2. Okay, go ahead and pause the video one last time and try and do those last two parts on your own. Okay, so those are the answers that you should have gotten for those last two parts.